The Ninth Doctor returns for another box set of adventures with Big Finish. As in today's audio drama review, I'm going to be taking a look at the fourth and final volume as a part of the Ninth Doctor Adventures Series 1, entitled Old Friends, starring Christopher Eccleston, alongside some familiar faces, including the return of the Brigadier, as portrayed by John Culshaw. This release is available to order now from the official Big Finish website, and it is available in a number of different formats, including download, physical CD, and a limited edition vinyl. I do believe it's limited to 1,000 units, and once it is sold out, it is sold out for good. There is also bundle options available for this episode and the previous volumes as part of this series, so you can purchase them all together in the multiple different formats and saving a little bit of money along the way as well. So this box set is split into 3 stories. The first episode is Fond Farewell, and it is a singular story of 1 hour long, and then the final 2 episodes of the box set are in fact a 2-parter featuring the return of the Brigadier and the Cybermen, both of which have been written by Roy Gill, and it's very exciting to have a 2-parter as a part of this series. One of the themes that I've loved with the Ninth Doctor Big Finish series so far is that the stories that will probably get less attention by fans on announcement turn out to be absolutely cracking adventures. In my opinion, Girl Deconstructed and Fright Motif fall into this category, and joining them is Fond Farewell, as written by David K. Barnes. When set alongside a 2-parter where the Brigadier meets the Ninth Doctor, and oh, let's throw in the classic series Cybermen in there too, it's easy for Fond Farewell to be overshadowed, but it shouldn't be, as it's a great story in its own right. As humans get more advanced with technology, a company who goes by the name of Fond Farewell gives relatives the chance to say goodbye to their loved ones one last time, by letting them attend their own funeral. What could possibly go wrong? On request, having been on his final expedition, the Doctor shows up at the funeral of Professor Flynn Beckett. Except upon being reunited, it's clear that Flynn has no idea who the Doctor even is, or his personal research assistant for that matter. Memories have been tainted, and it's unsure if this is the Flynn that his family know and love. David has written an absolute belter with this plot. There is a sinister air to the entire adventure, with the emotionless servants led by the AI, who goes by the name of Thomas, who is in control pretty much of the entire company. Emotions are running high, and the Doctor is straight to the point as ever. Eccleston's performance gives the listener a guiding hand. You very much feel like you are being taken on an adventure with him. He captivates in every single scene. Through the use of flashbacks, I loved his relationship with the Professor. It's nice to see this incarnation have a pre-existing relationship with someone, rather than being the usual lonely wanderer, which is a theme that has been followed throughout the Big Finish Ninth Doctor series so far. The widow of Professor Beckett, Adara, is also an excellent, well-written character. The later half of the story presents an emotional performance which made the character feel incredibly real. Emotions are difficult, especially with reference to the complexity of relationships. Equally, Sasha Yan acts as a lovely episode-specific companion to the Ninth Doctor. She knows the Professor personally and builds a strong bond with the Ninth Doctor throughout, much like Beckett himself. It's clear that the story dedicates a decent enough amount of time to each character in order for the listener to actually care about them. Ahead of the Ninth Doctor series finale 2-parter, Fond Farewell acts as an incredibly strong self-contained adventure, which personally I really enjoyed listening to. The plot has a hint of darkness, but equally is very enjoyable, with bold characters making it very accessible for new listeners. As the Doctor is surrounded by people thinking about old memories, on his next adventure, he also decides to check in on his past. There is an element of Fond Farewell that is absolutely ridiculous, and as a result it does kind of fit into the concept of the early Russell T Davies era, where you have a story that is kind of over the top, however somehow manages to tell a very serious story at the same time. It kind of skips between the boundary of absolutely ridiculous and very, very serious. I think that is a very, very specific tone to hit, and David K. Barnes does a very good job of doing that. I think there's a beautiful moment in in this story where you realise that the professor who we are of course attending the funeral of is basically trying to escape his own funeral. There's probably a metaphor in there somewhere, but it's absolutely ridiculous where you have these AI robots who are kind of keeping them all within the funeral area or fond farewell. Meanwhile they're trying to escape or surrounded by all of his relatives, and that rather sad situation of he is trying to escape, not for himself, but for his family, because naturally, of course, he's already dead, so he just wants his family and relatives and friends to be able to get to safety, as opposed to him, because he's probably not going to be able to go beyond the fond farewell facility. There is an element to this story that does feel very calm before the storm, very Boomtown, I suppose, which is a very easy comparison to make, given that it is a singular story, right before what felt like back as a kid being a very, very big series finale with the likes of Parting of the Ways and Bad Wolf. You just have a singular story which you can very easily just press play on, sit back and enjoy and not really think about it too much, but equally for those of you that want to dissect the story, there's many different layers and thought processes to this plot, as well as many different characters you can kind of think about and their perspectives. So it's a nice story where it's kind of just standalone before the series finale, which has a very interesting mixture of drama, suspense, whilst rather hard-hitting emotional moments as well. Roy Gale pens the series finale of the first series of Big Finish Ninth Doctor adventures, starting with Night of the Buryman. It feels so good having a two-parter with the Ninth Doctor, complete with its own cliffhanger. This story feels incredibly 2005 Doctor Who, whilst also delving into new territories and creating a new era for the Ninth Doctor with its own stylistic theme. The Brigadier is in Scotland doing a little bit of fieldwork for UNIT after a number of ghostly sightings have been reported, whilst the Doctor decides to check in on him after many years of being away. I'm going to get straight to the point and talk about the Ninth Doctor and the Brigadier's dynamic. It's brilliant seeing Eccleston perform alongside a well-established Doctor Who character. There is so much purity and strength within their relationship, and John Culshaw, as always, provides such a beautifully authentic performance. The positioning of Nine's incarnation in particular makes for an interesting interaction. The Brigadier can tell that the Doctor is different. I love how both characters acknowledge how they've changed over time as the story progresses, and both parts work really well together in order to build a story. There's a certain scene which really stood out to me as a listener, where Roy really caught the personalities of both Nine and the Brigadier spot on. By this point in the series, Chris is really starting to shine within the audio drama format. Roy has captured his little quirks and awkwardness delightfully, with some funny one-liners matched with the typical Nine bluntness. If you've watched my review of the previous volume, I do dig a little bit deeper into my own views on this Doctor meeting the Cybermen, which was something that initially I didn't really want to happen, and I certainly didn't expect to see them return so soon after Volume 3. The location is used in such a precise manner, tying into the plot, making for something really special. The sound design has quite a number of difficult environments to replicate, from boat journeys, trains passing at speed, and being at a height with the wind whipping around the characters. This two-parter really does feel like a dramatic series finale, and personally I could visualise it completely within my mind throughout. Given that I have listened to the UNIT new series adventures, it's quite a satisfying touch seeing Sam Bishop receive a UNIT origin story. His relationship with Fiona is touching and reminded me of the domestic angle seen within the Russell T Davies era of Doctor Who. Throughout the two parts, Warren Brown acts as a welcoming companion for the Ninth Doctor, and part 1 does an effective job of setting up the characters for the finale. It's worth noting that this episode doesn't particularly feature too much of the Cybermen, as I first thought it would, but when they do show up, it is very eerie and spooky. Roy Gale is undeniably a very clever writer, but what I love about his stories is that he somehow manages to bring his own personality to all of the episodes that he writes. So for example, in this episode we have a Cyberman invasion of Scotland, which at first you may sound, alright, yeah, fair enough. However, it kind of tackles that ongoing theme with new series Doctor Who, which has kind of been departed from in recent years, especially with the 13th Doctor era, where we did have quite a focus on the north of England, which I was quite happy to see. However, we still don't kind of go north-north. We still don't see the likes of Middlesbrough being portrayed as much, or even like Newcastle and Cumbria. So it would be nice in the future if maybe we could have Doctor Who set up Newcastle or something like that. That would be quite fun. I think that throughout both of the parts, especially part 1, Roy Gill focuses a lot on the history, and that does of course come into proper relevance within part 2. And episode 1 really does dig into the area, so as a result, as a listener, you are hearing about these different locations, in particular the Forth Bridge, which is lovely and visualised throughout the episode in a really effective way, through the eyes of Fiona, who is a tour guide around the city, or at least a historian who has learned a lot about the area. So whilst we have this Cyberman invasion and this possible ghostly apparition, at the same time we are learning about the environment this story finds itself within. I also like the way that this episode actually draws in the themes of Fond Farewell. I love the fact that the only reason why the Ninth Doctor is revisiting the Brigadier is because of the events of Fond Farewell, the fact that he is returning because he's been to somebody's funeral, and a lovely quote that is said is about leaving things left unsaid, and he didn't want to do that. He wanted to go back to the Brigadier, he wanted to talk to him. That is really lovely, and we get to see that more emotional side to the Ninth Doctor, which only crops up through certain stories, the likes of, say, the end of Empty Child and the Doctor Dances with Everybody Lives. The series concludes with the 4th generation, and this story continues with the grand cinematic style. We get lots more Cybermen content for this episode compared to part 1, so naturally we get a lot of interaction between the Cybermen and 9. I do like how this story feels very different in style to the monster of Metropolis. It kind of justifies having an episode once again with the Cybermen so soon after that story, and it's kind of similar to how we had the Slovene pop up multiple times throughout Doctor Who Series 1 as well. Having the monster of Metropolis and then this 2-part series finale works in a very similar way to the Daleks within Series 1, including Dalek, The Parting of the Ways and Bad Wolf, working collectively as a story. Here we have one Cyberman, now let's see you deal with an army. It is absolutely clear that Roy Gill adores writing for Doctor Who. The narrative is sprinkled with references, and clearly so much thought has gone into respecting the pre-existing characters, but also the story evidently builds on the cyber hierarchy, including upgrades and the emotional inhibitor. I love the way that this episode manages to somehow encompass the history of the Brigadier, whilst also incorporating in those traditional elements of the Cybermen within classic series Doctor Who as well. It works as a bridge between new series and classic series Doctor Who. I can't really think of many Cybermen stories which somehow feed off local history, much like part 1, using the location to complement the Cybermen's aims. It's really clever, but also not too convoluted with plot threads linking to history and the Cybermen. Eleanor Lawless is one of the standout performances for this story as Sam Bishop's partner Fiona. She's caring, intelligent and considerably fearless. Within part 1 she really fills the boots of a companion, working with Eccleston perfectly. In part 2 her character really engaged me throughout. The one thing that I thought this story could have benefited from was a little bit more body horror. It's down to personal preference, but I do love when Big Finish go a little bit gory with the Cybermen. We do have a few conversion scenes in there, but in my mind I was pushing for more. That said, Roy has used the Cybermen in a way which makes them very interesting to visualise, to see in your mind whilst listening to this episode, such as them rising from the Scottish rivers, as well as disguising themselves in cloaks and terrorising the locals. A little bit of a spoiler, but I in particular love at the very start of the 3rd episode of this box set, we kind of go back in time and see the origins of the Cybermen and how that has influenced the current day events within the story, being in early 2000. I was really pleasantly surprised by what this 2-parter had to offer. It ends with a delightful scene with the Ninth Doctor and the Brigadier, which, as the titles concluded, gave me a warm, buzzy feeling of nostalgia. It's one of those moments that I absolutely adore Big Finish for. It's been a pleasure seeing the Ninth Doctor go on these brand new adventures after having quite a long time away from the role, and I can't wait to see where the TARDIS takes him next. Finally, for this review, I am going to mention a little bit of canon context, simply to rebut any fears that you can't listen to this volume if you haven't listened to any of the previous Ninth Doctor adventures. There is indeed a little bit of a plot arc which has been threaded throughout the previous volumes. However, said plot arc I'm going to tell you now, which is something I never normally do throughout these reviews. However, it is such a small plot arc that bears absolutely zero relevance to the actual narrative of these stories that it can't really be even classed as a spoiler, and that is basically the fact that the TARDIS keeps on landing in Scotland. Within Volume 2, Respond to All Calls, we had Girl Deconstructed, which was an episode set, I do believe, in Glasgow, if I can remember right, and then in the third volume of stories, Lost Warriors, we'd also have an episode set in Scotland, which was the Macbeth story, and then in this one we have this series finale. So yeah, that is pretty much it for the theme, and overall you can listen to this box set if you haven't listened to the previous ones. These are standalone stories, and to be honest, if anything, I really do recommend this box set because you have a really lovely two-part episode of the Cybermen, so it's familiar territory, the Brigadier, everybody basically knows him, and then you have a really nice standalone episode as well, where you can just simply click play on it and enjoy. So yeah, it's one of those episodes where even though this is volume 4, you don't need the previous volumes in order to enjoy this series, and to be quite honest, I think you can listen to pretty much any of the previous volumes in isolation out of order as well. As it is concluding for the Ninth Doctor Adventures Series 1, I think that this volume, Old Friends, as well as Volume 2, Respond to All Calls, remain up there at the top as my favourite volumes released as a part of the Ninth Doctor Adventures so far. I can't wait to see what happens next for this incarnation, because we do have a second series already confirmed. I do believe the first volume of which is coming out in a matter of months, so a very quick turnaround. I'm very excited to see what the next era holds. It's already looking likely the Big Finish are going to continue to put their stamp on the Ninth Doctor era, because we are voyaging into new territory. We're not really dipping into the TV era for the Ninth Doctor as of yet. So yeah, I'm very, very excited to see what characters are going to come along the way, or I would like to see some really, really experimental stories. But yes, let's see. Only time will tell, but I can't wait to see what comes next for these Ninth Doctor stories. So thank you very much for watching this review of the Ninth Doctor Adventures Old Friends. I really hope you have enjoyed it. Do of course stay tuned on the Host Productions for regular Doctor Who content. Of course, on that note, have a nice day. I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.